Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook. So I'm going to put on my best telephone voice because the red light's rolling. Kate was worried that I might not ask her any questions during the podcast, so that would be quite interesting if I just sat there with my arms folded. Go on, Kate, perform. which I'm not going to do. Say again, sorry?
I think bringing the discussion of the football shirt in to get you talking. I'd be like,
Yeah. Well, that would be a good thing to do, wouldn't it? That would be great. So, listeners, welcome to this episode of Fleet Geeks podcast. I've got Kate Walker with me. She is the co-founder of the diabetes. Well, you go for it, Kate. I'm going to shut up. I know it's diabetes, but I can't remember the exact word. So go with it, Kate. You're the founder of
the Diabetes Safety Organisation.
There we go. And Kate, for the benefit of the listeners, because I will make a right ham mess of it. I'm no good at introducing people very well. I know you're an expert in all things diabetes. Could you just explain to the audience a bit about your background, how you came to founding the Diabetes Safety Organisation, and a bit about the work you do, if that's okay?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on today, Pete. It's great. So I think the background's quite interesting. I did a lot of work around diabetes education through the NHS, personal trainer as well, and all the world previously. Men weren't presenting to GPs, and they were saying, really, men don't come. And I said, well, we need to go out to them. How do we start to do that? They didn't. I decided that I would. So started to go onto construction sites, actually. And apologies to all listeners, but to discuss erectile dysfunction with the lads in the tin sheds is largely what I was doing as a genuine statement, because 75% of men who have diabetes suffer erectile dysfunction at some point, which isn't okay, and it's a preventable condition. So I went on site. You can imagine 30 lads in a tin shed with that conversation. I've learned a lot, but also kind of got the message over, but then realised actually little is understood by management around diabetes, the risks, the legal implications, DVLA regs, kind of all of it. So went away and started to look into it and kind of developed the company from there. Almost it kind of came out of what I perceived was a need around diabetes risk. And that's why we have diabetes safety. So not just the condition from a medical perspective, but the implication of the health and safety in the workplace around diabetes. And it's kind of going out of there for best practice in and across kind of key industries like transport, warehousing, construction, where there are increased risks and safety.
Awesome. And how far into this journey are you? How long ago did you found the business?
This part of the business, in terms of going into this area, it's been about 4 to 5 years. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? You find this niche, you can see that there's a requirement and need, but then helping other people to see that this is an actual thing takes time, and pulling it together to be where we are today is taken a few years.
Yeah, sure. And I think I'll point listeners to when Kate came on a moment ago before we started recording, we were talking about, aside from drifting Mustangs and stuff like that, and Cantona kicking Crystal Palace fans, we did talk a little bit about the fact that you've done a few podcasts before. So if you do look Kate up, she has done some podcasts before, a very in-depth one with Backhouse Jones around different case law. So it'd be worth having a bit of a listen to that off the back of that, and Driving for Better Business as well, which is a podcast I often recommend. So do go and check those out. But certainly for the time being, obviously, I guess the starting point for listeners is to understand. So diabetes, you've got type 1, type 2. From a fleet manager's perspective, I guess they understand that drivers are reluctant to come and talk to them about diabetes because of the impact it could have on their livelihood and their license. So I guess just for a starting point, technically, what is diabetes and why is it an issue for drivers? Is a good starting point.
Okay, perfect. I think at its simplest, diabetes is a sugar intolerance. So if anybody whilst they're watching this is eating a biscuit, blood sugars naturally rise. The body, if you don't have diabetes, produces insulin, and that pulls down the sugar levels. So it's a nice stable level.
Sure.
If you have got diabetes, your body either doesn't produce enough or good enough insulin, and your blood sugars stay high. And over time, that's what causes the damage. So the body just can't self-regulate. And if you imagine a glass of sugary water and dropped a dull coin in, one of my lads on construction told me it would sink. I was like, that's smart, it definitely would. But also over time, the coin will eventually shine.
Sure.
So then we think, well, if our blood sugars are high and stay high because we've got either pre-diabetes or diabetes, sadly, we're not robots. We don't become shiny entities. We end up kind of rotting. So it's the back of the eye damage, which is why we have eye issues. Your man issues begin because the nerves get damaged. Bottom of the feet, we can lose sensation in feet. Mm-hmm. So it's sugar when it's rogue in the body or left unmanaged is what causes the long-term damage and problems. And so diabetes, effectively, the body can't re-regulate itself. And so either medicine's needed or other things are taken on board.
Sure.
I do think it's important to separate type 1 and type 2. So there's 5 million currently people living with diabetes. Only 400,000, still crazy big numbers, but only 400,000 have type 1 diabetes.
Sure.
So they're 5%. And it's an autoimmune condition. And I find the work we do for this and our charity that people with type 1 get really frustrated that they're branded in the type 2 bracket. It's a totally different condition. Their body had an autoimmune response and the pancreas, the part that produces insulin, just quit. And there's nothing they can do. They have to inject every day. It's a lot of work. And I think for managers, it's really important they understand the difference to have the correct conversation. And I think it makes a difference when we have that conversation.
Okay.
And then with type 2s, I think there's this horrible stigma. It's because I'm overweight, it's because of this. And actually, so many factors. It's a hormonal condition. So many factors. Shift patterns alone, which on this sort of podcast is exactly it. There's huge clinical evidence that shows nighttime working and shift pattern changes can be a cause in and of itself for diabetes. So one of the things I really want to get out there is we need to remove the stigma and make the space for the conversation so people feel they can come and have it. Otherwise, we're never going to get past this grey area of them not coming forward, and then we've got dangers on the road or people not wishing to share.
Got you. Okay, so with regards to diabetes then, so what we've talked a bit about, so type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is pancreatic, can't do anything about it, etc. Type 2 sounds like potentially through lifestyle changes we can improve the type 2 diabetes. Is that correct? Through lifestyle changes?
Yes, I think, yeah, absolutely. So I think through the easiest example is like a car. So if I drove my car in first gear, not drifting, but just drove my car in first gear down to London from Birmingham, no one would be surprised the engine's smoking. Hopefully I change gears on the way back, the car's good. Mm-hmm. But if I keep driving in first, warning signs will come up and then at some point the engine will stop. And I think type 2s, the easiest is that analogy. So pre-diabetes is the warning signs. You've been in first gear too long, the warning signs start coming. As long as you don't duct tape over them and you get diagnosed soon enough, more often than not, it can be reversed. And there's currently 13.9 million people in the UK with pre-diabetes.
Okay.
There's a lot of warning signs.
Number.
Yeah, it's a really big number. And they're coming into our workplace. So yeah, it's not, there's a cascade waiting to happen.
Okay. So great question then. Or look at me congratulating myself on a great question. I haven't actually asked it yet. I didn't really mean to do that. It's a bit embarrassing, but at least I'll pick up on it, right? So a question. Someone else can decide if it's great. How do we spot pre-diabetes if it's so common? How do we spot pre-diabetes, and what's pre-diabetes?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is a great question, actually. I think we'll go with that. But also, it's a tricky question.
Massage my ego. I don't know why my ego's here, but it's here today.
Well, so it is over the shoulder of your poster, Canton Art Up. I think it's a hard question. So lots of people don't see it because a lot of the symptoms are quite mild, can be perceived as mild. So drinking more water, going to the toilet, sleeping more, sleep in the afternoons, waking up in the night to go to the toilet. Some of it's sexual dysfunction challenges. The problem is a lot of them can put down, well, it was hot, so of course I'm 30, I drank more and then I went to the toilet. It's very easy to bury our heads about it. So there is Diabetes UK, the charity, have a Know Your Risk score questionnaire. It's free. That might give some indication. But also kind of doing your MOT tests or just having a blood sugar test if we're concerned is really important, because I think it is one of those funny symptoms that we can brush away. So I think the more we can get checked or tested, and it's really funny, people always laugh about my car analogy, especially some of the lads on site, and they're like, well, you shouldn't drive them first. I'm like, but you are. Like, I can buy a new car at worst. Your body's not going to rechange itself. So how do we kind of get that conversation? Because it is arguably caught early with some changes made, it's potentially reversible and prevent, we have 190 amputations a week in the UK from diabetes, 500 unnecessary heart attacks, 500 deaths. I mean, the statistics, if I can speak, are staggering, but no one really sees diabetes like that. Oh, it's just diabetes. And I think we need to really bring that into awareness that we can do something about it and make a big difference.
Okay, sure. So, okay, pre-diabetes, really common. Diabetes type 2, really common. Diabetes type 1, less common. And pre-diabetes, time to act about stuff, right?
Yeah,
so,
don't duct tape over the symptoms.
Sure, yeah. So stop driving in first, start using the other gears, right?
Yeah.
So lifestyle changes, improved diet, less sugar, more exercise, better sleep, that kind of stuff. Are we looking at those types of recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is the simple stuff. Unfortunately, there's no magic one that says if you take this, it'll go away. It's those small changes we know we should make. We have a big One Less campaign that we're very happy to share anytime. So 1 less spoonful of sugar in 6 teas or coffees or hot chocolates, whatever you might drink a day, is 1 kilogram less a month. So 12 bags a year of sugar. So, small changes will make an absolutely significant difference. Because I think, I don't know, we're in May. I'm not sure if you're still doing your New Year's resolutions, Pete, or if anybody else is when they're listening to this. We have these big intentions and we look at these big weight loss companies. The return rate is 95%. So they're not working. If ladies want to hear that, they're not working, because you go once if they were working, and I think to get this to change, we need to do things slowly and small. That 1 less sugar or 1 less biscuit. And we talk about facilities on motorways and stuff. There are better choices. We don't have to have the big grab bag, or we don't have to have the exercise chocolate bar, because it wouldn't make a difference. But actually, because I'm sufficiently sad, I've sat and calculated and had a whole campaign for this. It does make a huge difference. And over 10 years, it's, 120 bags of sugar means, prevention or management of a condition that hasn't actually done much. You haven't had to do too much. So I think those small shifts, a bit more walking, if there's something you can add in, if there's an exercise you like, start doing star jumps in your living room, whatever floats your boat. It doesn't need to be like a massive gym session, because I don't think we sustain it. Well, we know we don't. We wouldn't have this problem if people were actually sticking to their resolutions or plans.
Sure. Oh, do you know what? So psychology of dieting, fantastic. Like one of my favorite subjects, right? So diet industry is worth a lot of money, isn't it? Diet industry is worth a lot of money. So first thing I was going to point out, so when we talk about this, I think about Dr. Chatterjee with his 4 pillars around movement. No, shaking your head. Relaxation, movement, diet, and sleep.
Perfect.
The 4 pillars of health, or his 4 pillars of health, which I think it helps me understand, right? But when we come to the psychology of dieting, so I did NLP Master Prac, and we talk about like setting goals and people's behavior around goals and behavioral stuff like that, which I'm sure you'll have come across loads. And hopefully I don't lose too many of the audience as I talk about this stuff. But in NLP, we talk about like the wall of shit and the tree of abundance. And the issue is most of us focus when we set on goals on the wall of shit. So for example, dieting works like this, right? So if we focus on, I'm that dissatisfied with how fat, ugly, horrific looking I am, or whatever it might be at the beginning of the year, so I'm going to lose a load of weight, so I'm going to go to Weight Watchers or Slimming World or whatever it might be, where I'm going to associate with a load of people who feel the same way and are gonna, like, it's in their interest to continue to make me feel that way and dissatisfied with myself, so I continue to go. And the other thing is that we're facing this wall of shit, right? The goal is I want to be less like that. I want to start to feel better. And what happens is as we start to feel better, so we eat better, we exercise more, etc., the pain becomes less. And the issue with that is what's most likely to happen, because we're focusing on being less of whatever we're dissatisfied with. We end up being drawn back to it again because that's where the focus is. There's psychology behind that. Whereas the benefit is to turn around and go the other way and go, actually, I'm going to take small steps to make my life better. And I'm going to continue on the journey of making my life better. It's not about being less dissatisfied. It's about increasing satisfaction, which is quite a mindset change for people to achieve their goals around that stuff, and to set achievable goals and steps to then slowly improve and continue to improve, rather than because the issue is when you focus on removing the pain, once the pain removes, you just end up going back to it again. The old habits come back.
Good.
Anyway,
I think
you're the PT, Kate. You know that's your thing, right?
There was an interesting study done actually on driving in America through the deserts, and exactly the same point. There's more nothingness than anything, but when a car hits oil or slips in the desert and starts spinning, more cars hit the telegraph poles posts that are like every mile apart than they hit the nothingness, which is the most of it. And they did this study, and the cars spinning hit the lamppost or post thing. And it's quite interesting. The evidence shows, because when the car starts spinning, your head goes, I don't want to hit the post. So by virtue, the brain goes and finds the post, and therefore hits the very thing that you're trying to avoid, instead of thinking, I want to hit the nothingness, which is exactly the same point. And I think it sits true with kind of in the workforce around exactly the work we're doing. We go in and they're like, well, diabetes isn't a problem. Like, well, you don't think it's a problem. 1 in 12 of your staff in the workforce have diabetes, and actually the research we've just come up with is 1 in 6 who drive for a living have diabetes. So we're talking some serious numbers in the workplace. It's new data we've just produced, and it's this point of people going, well, it's never going to happen to us, it's not coming into us, we've only got one person we know about them. I'm like, you haven't. If you've got a fleet of over 12, you've probably got 2.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
You know, if you're lucky, you've got one, that's great. But if these sorts of positions, and what happens, and people go, well, it won't happen. I'm like, well, accidents are happening all the time on the roads. They will happen. It's just a matter of time, and we see it, and it's a criminal offence. There's sanctions in place, and if you type in diabetes accidents, no company as yet has had that impact. But actually, the challenge sits is that it's going to happen, and if you haven't done everything that's reasonable and practicable in the event of, diabetes is a known and foreseeable risk. So it sits in this really interesting point. And as you say, everyone's facing the wall going, we don't want that to happen. But actually what they need to do is say, how do we proactively ensure real simple steps that are in place? Because, it is happening. We know it's happening, just because it's not yet been done like that. And there's some very good lawyers out there getting people to come up with interesting alternatives to diabetes, because it's criminal both to the individual and to the company due to its known and foreseeable risk. And I think, as you say, exactly the psychology of nutrition, and I think it's psychology of humans as a whole, will deal with it when the belt buckle doesn't shut anymore, or when the fatality happens, or when it's too much. And then we'll look at the problem instead of going, hey, actually, I've heard that. Maybe I could just face this way, and very quickly and simply put in place some very straightforward measures, do some risk assessments, open up the opportunity to talk about a condition that we know exists, particularly in the working male population who, drive in, don't have time for GPs, don't want to know, hiding from it. And we did a talk. I was in a talk and they talked about rolling brakes for about an hour and a half. I'm none the wiser. I know fast cars, but I don't understand brakes or rolling brakes or technical stuff. So I'm not protesting, but I sat there and listened. And then they asked about my diabetes side of stuff. And I was like, however great your brakes, rolling brakes and testing of them are, if someone's undiagnosed, and there's a million currently undiagnosed, we think a higher percentage of men, and it's not meant in a rude way, just they don't present as well. Actually, what about the foot that's behind the brake that, due to neuropathy, the damage of the sugar, now can't feel the brake correctly? people wouldn't know, same as our belt size just doesn't fit and we get tighter in our trousers. It's only when we have to go up a size that we really notice it, because we can ignore it otherwise. Even they're a bit tighter. Well, I ate a bit too much bloated bread yesterday. We can all justify our life. But actually the base of the foot can't feel the brake or the accelerator, and over pushes or slips, then what? A condition we know about. And so I think you're right in your psychology, not just of nutrition. I think it's a general, I'm a master practitioner in NLP too, but general practitioner issue. Yeah. I think there's a general sentiment around it as a model of how we present in the world as a whole. So I think it's a good analogy.
Sure. Awesome. Cool. I love that you've done Master Prac as well. That's so cool. And that's so bad of me to have just assumed that you wouldn't have done. I don't know why I assumed that, but I just assume it's just this niche thing that only weird people do. And I didn't put you in the weird category, Kate.
Oh, no, you can. Feel free.
Clearly you're in the weird category too, right? Cool. By the way, NLP is not that weird. I didn't really mean it like that, but you know what I mean. Like, people, you need to be quite interested in this stuff to commit to the level of doing practitioner and then master practitioner, right? So I
think it's interesting though, and I do think it's that point of saying I'm sufficiently interested to understand human behaviour, to understand how we function to do these courses. And I think that's what I'm fascinated by. And when we do look at that modelling that you're talking about, I think it runs across everywhere, and it runs across when we look at and sticking to drivers. What is our mentality when we're in the vehicle for a long time? What is our mentality as a manager of, I don't have time to deal with the fact you've got diabetes, or you might have diabetes, and I might have to consider what to do if you don't. We'll be okay. And I think we have this mentality through nutrition, through well-being. You look at the obesity rates going up, diabetes is rising, our roads aren't getting particularly much safer. There's big campaigns happening, I know, at the moment. Why are we not sitting back and going, actually, I'm willing to take some responsibility, not look, as you said, at that wall, but go, actually, I take responsibility for myself and or my team and do something about this, rather than wait for something to happen and then do it. I think we just have this wait and hit and hope mentality rather than proactive.
Yeah.
action.
Well, I think there's a bit of a challenge around there's a bit of a challenge around this is the way we've always done things, and this has always been the challenge, and that's a pretty dangerous thing. So my next question. Sorry?
The world was believed to be flat once until it wasn't. Yeah. I think it's okay that this mentality is a slow process, because we all like comfortable slippers, and we don't like breaking in those new ones. I think it's a real challenge. But you only need a couple of key people or companies or someone who's willing to say, that did make enough sense. I will do a little bit of something about that. To plug some of the stuff we do, we've got a free survey companies can use. We've got free poster campaigns. If that's all we got from today, and someone did decide to stick their head above the pulpit and go, this is probably quite serious, this may be worthy of doing something, I think that's the win. And that's why I do these. This is, how do we get just that one? One makes a difference. And then suddenly a few more go, maybe Kate isn't as crazy as we all think she might have been about this diabetes. And then eventually the world goes from being flat to round, and it suddenly changes. It just takes time, and it definitely takes someone willing to maybe look a little crazy to have the conversation first.
Yeah, sure. Well, crazy are the game changers, right? So just nice reframe there, right? And so what's interesting then, two questions, I think, and I'm scared that I'm going to forget the second one. So I'm going to ask both, and then I'll make sure I don't forget the second one, because you'll answer the first one. But what actions do we want the fleet and transport managers who are listening to take? What's the action? And what then are the common pushbacks off the back of us telling them to take the action because they're scared? And then we can combat both at the same time. So what's the actions, if that makes sense? What people listening to this now, what steps do we want them to take? What activity needs to be done? Because ultimately them learning this stuff and doing nothing about it is as worthless as not knowing it. So what do we need them to do?
I think it's more dangerous to have listened and known, because now it's a known.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Legally, it's a real challenge that becomes
known and foreseeable. Yeah, known and foreseeable.
Yeah, so under the Health and Safety at Work Act, that's exactly the challenge. And also, diabetes is a disability under the Equality Act. So actually, employers are safe, and reasonable adjustments are very small to do. So one of the things, the ideal first step would be contact me and we can share that information. It's is to do the free survey, because there's no cost, there's no argument. Pop it out, people will come back and say how they feel. We do a little report of where the risks are, and then can support. It's basically campaigns and awareness, education for managers or the key people to understand, and then implement the right risk assessments. Most of it will be done. There's just a few changes that need to be put in place, and a little bit of education shows that you've done enough, because that's going to be the key in the event of something. So I think the survey is the first point, because then also people can see it isn't just somebody coming up with an idea. It'll evidence the reason why this is important, and then they can take these small steps, reasonable adjustments, give them breaks, make sure they can do their testing, and then, you know, put in place some education so the right conversations can be had, the risk assessments can be done. There's no blanket bans in this country, and if there are problems, we can help the DVLA and kind of with licenses, but there are no blanket bans in this country. Everyone can drive, so it doesn't change anything. It just makes you safe.
Cool. So that's good. So straightforward action, a free survey is the action to take, which I'll share a link in the show notes for people to take the action, because that's what's most important. And then the next step then is, what are the fleet managers and transport managers thinking or worrying about now? What is the pushback you get?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's an absolute valid worry. I think the main worry is, what happens if half our fleet have diabetes? Do they have to come off the roads? I can't keep my business going. The key, people on insulin have to test every 2 hours whilst driving. So type 1s will be doing that already. Type 2s on insulin, hopefully are doing it, but may not even know. But all they need to do is test, and then they're safe. No one loses their license. So that's the key pushback, is again, lack of awareness of what could be. The perception is, oh my God, if they come forward, I've not got enough drivers. Actually, if they come forward, you've got safer drivers, and they will stay and work longer. So our recent research shows that 75% of people with diabetes are keeping their blood sugars higher than their medical professionals' advice to prevent any risks, because they don't speak about it at work, which actually is causing them to exit the workforce 4 to 5 years early. And in a company, or in the size of 1,000, that's 14 to 16 people every year exiting early, which at a time we don't have enough in our work in the industry. Actually, if they come forward, they're one, safer on the roads, they're more productive, they're probably going to become your best staff because they're actually generally healthier, and you are safe from it. So we absolutely believe a diabetes safe employer will improve on all areas, and we're happy to help with that, present to the right people, and kind of give that support that that's where that can end. And no one can't drive. It's just putting the safety in place for them to drive safely.
Cool. And that will take the form of guidance, training, risk assessments, that sort of stuff.
Everything that's probably already done for other conditions. It just needs to be slightly adjusted. Quick couple of questions. Which medicines are they on? What do they need to check? And is there anything else you need for us? And put in the right, test points if they need to test. Not all people need to test. Not all type 2s need to test. And just have the right conversation. And yeah, it is actually very straightforward. It's almost that unknown what has happened. Oh God, are we going to lose all our drivers? But actually then they go, oh, that was, and when we work with companies, they go, oh, that was really straightforward. But actually the prevention from a cost and risk implication and what could happen is actually staggering. Sure.
Okay. And I did have a third question. So we've done the actions to take, we've done the pushbacks, the third question's disappeared. So let me ask the question of, what's the great question that I've not thought to ask yet, Kate?
Well, that is a good question. I think for me, I suppose I would like to get across is, although it might not be a problem or a seen problem right now, diabetes is often that condition. Oh yeah, Bob in the park's got, he takes his tablets, there's no problem. It's a massive gateway. The World Economic Forum know it's going to come and cripple businesses. We're trying to get ahead of the game. I know we're potentially ahead of the game, so people haven't heard of it, but I think we need to take it. For me, it would be, why do it? And it's the case of, why wouldn't you do it when we know the risks are there and they're very serious and easy to prevent? And I don't know how I don't know how we articulate that better. I'd be very happy for listeners to give some views of how this gets articulated actually across this industry, particularly of how do we get heard in a way that doesn't push people off. Because we're seeing diabetes drop in age as well. What was perceived as the old man's condition, that was always what it was seen as, is now dropping in age. We're seeing a lot younger in their 30s. And actually in Walsall, there's 12 children under 12 years of age with type 2. And it's aggressive. And, you know, this is what's coming through our workforce. This is how do we sustain and get our workforces healthy and away from what is on its way.
Cool. Awesome. So I'm going to do my little bit with a bit of disclosure. So I'm not diabetic, but I got diagnosed in January. I went to see a private doctor, which I know is a privilege to be able to do. But I went and saw a private doctor, and I had all my blood tests. And I've always had a high BMI because I'm built quite big, and I go to the gym and I train and stuff like that. And I'm in the gym 4 to 5 times a week, which is probably more than most truck drivers. I eat relatively healthily. Last year I dropped 20 kilos from 120 to 100, and my doctor is still telling me that I have this thing called insulin resistance, which essentially is pre-diabetes. And that I need to cut sugar out of my diet completely and lose another 10 kilos to get down to 90 to get my BMI low enough so that diabetes is no longer a risk factor. So that was quite frightening. I'm not doing the best job. So since then, I've lost 5 kilos. I've still got, so I peaked a little bit because it was January time. So over Christmas, I put on a bit more. So I'm down. I'm at 100 again at the minute, but I've still got the 10 kilos to go. Right. So, and one of the challenges that I have is that at 100, so I'm faced a little bit with that challenge around. I'm actually quite comfortable because the recency of being 120, a lot of the clothes refit now. I'm feeling pretty okay. I train well in the gym. I'm practicing for High Rocks in October, but actually, so the currency of my challenge is actually quite low, apart from when I think about what the doctors told me. But actually, I feel okay, I sleep okay, and all of that sort of stuff. But actually, inside there's this thing, and I have to try and keep my calories low. But the issue is I know that I've got a sugar problem because I'm just drawn to sugar all the time. So I'm constantly fighting. I'm fighting this sort of draw to sugar. So I'm really consciously aware of it as well. So it's a worry, isn't it? You know, I've been advised by the doctor to lose another 10 kilos, and I'm actually really struggling with that. So that's just me being a bit honest. And there'll be, I think the challenge I have and why this is so interesting for me is that I know that I've got, I guess, through the training and the development and the NLP and stuff like that, I've got this super high awareness of myself and the way I think and the way I'll look at a problem and stuff like that. But actually, there's lots of people out there who don't think day to day about these things. They just take the food or sleep the sleep or do whatever the old habits are that have always been the old habits without really thinking too much about it. And the worry is that as transport and fleet managers, we know the risks. Kate's shared the risks, the high volumes of people. And actually, I know that most businesses I work with will often not have the depth of the requirement met around the training, the education, the risk profiling, the risk assessment, that sort of stuff. So I think now's the call to action that actually, you know, I'm recognizing even as flagship partners as a business, and the way we consult with our companies is that it's something that we need to put on the agenda as part of the conversations we have, you know, roller brake testing, making sure workshop audits are audited and all the other stuff. And we talk about mental health. I talk regularly about men's mental health and stuff like that, but I've tended to shy away from the physical health stuff. So really interesting. But yeah, the first step's just a free survey, right?
Absolutely.
How accessible is that? Super easy, isn't it?
I think so. And yeah, and just get staff to do them, then you can see actually what is happening in your company. And it gives you the evidence that we're not just talking for the sake of talking, but actually this is a genuine thing and a real situation we need to work on.
Cool. Kate, thank you very much for joining me. If people are interested to speak to you, what's the best way to get in touch and speak to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a real delight to do today. But yeah, email is probably easiest at kate@diabetessafety.org. But we can pop that in the notes, I'm sure, along with a link for the survey and maybe the Diabetes UK Know Your Risk score as well, just to help people be able to go somewhere from here.
That'd be really cool. Yeah. So we'll get those links in the show notes. You're on LinkedIn as well, I think, aren't you?
And have a website.
Cool. So we'll get some links in the show notes, and please do reach out to Kate if you've got any questions. Drop me a line if you're concerned or anything like that. But yeah, get in touch. Take some action. Right. Do a free survey.
Yeah. Stop driving into the lamppost. That's what I say.
Yeah. Stop driving into the lamppost, or stop bungeeing back towards the wall of shit. Right. There's the learning for today.
Keynotes.
Kate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining, and hopefully the listeners have found it really useful. I certainly have found it enlightening. So thank you for sharing your expertise and fighting the good fight. And listeners, I'll see you all on the next one, or listen to you all on the next one. See you soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.